Good morning, everyone. I'm actually recording this the day after I recorded my big 2025 book ranking, and I kind of just wanted to follow this up with a sort of vlog style video about Rhythm of War, which is the book that I'm reading right now. This is book 4 in the Stormlight Archive. If you've seen my video about the books I read, you'll know that I am very much into the Stormlight Archive right now. Really enjoying reading through Brandon Sanderson and his huge fantasy Cosmere collection of books. And so yeah, Rhythm of War is kind of next up on the list for me, and I just wanted to give my thoughts of it as I'm reading through it. The style of this video is basically going to be that the book is split up into 5 parts, and so at the end of each part, I want to kind of give my thoughts on that part and on the book as a whole. I am a bit of a slow reader, so that means that Stormlight books like these that are like, I think this one is 1,200 or maybe 1,300 pages long, these take me a long time to get through. Oathbringer took me about 3 months to read, and so by the time I get to the end of it, some of my thoughts from the beginning might be a little bit fuzzier. So I'm hoping that I can kind of catch my thoughts in real time and give to you guys what I think of this. I recently got a promotion at work where I'll be going up to full-time. I was working part-time, and the semester started also last week. So I just have, kind of a lot of things coming together all at once that are gonna take up a lot of my time. So I don't know when this video is gonna come out. Maybe it'll be like in the summer when this video comes out for you guys, but the snowstorm hit pretty tough. It's still going on. It's gonna go on for like the rest of the day. Kind of thinking we'll maybe get the next day or two off of work. So yeah, I'm hoping to be able to stay in, be cozy, read some more of this book, maybe play some board games with my wife, or watch a show with my wife, or just read with my wife. I'm actually a decent part of the way already through part 2, so I might record the next section of this video pretty soon. I had some thoughts about the first part, just some initial thoughts that I kind of wanted to share. I think this is my least favorite opening for a Stormlight book so far, but I'll get into why with these next few points. The first one is just this time gap. So the first 3 Stormlight books, each book would span several months of time. The books were huge, the scale was huge, these events were playing out over months and months. But what I liked about them was that, for example, when I finished Way of Kings, Words of Radiance picked up the day after the Way of Kings ended. So you're never missing space in between. A lot of series one book will come out, and then when the second book comes out, there'll be, several months or even a year of time that passes between books. But Stormlight isn't like that. The events of each book immediately follow after the events of the last book. Rhythm of War is the first book to not do that. So there is a time gap of about a year that takes place between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, and it kind of bothers me. I kind of really don't like it. And there's a few reasons why. At the end of Oathbringer, we kind of get the sense that, okay, we're finally building this empire of the Radiant Orders with Dalinar at the helm. They're kind of putting together the city of Urithiru. They're rebuilding this army. They just established the coalition of kingdoms, and they're getting ready to start a defense against Odium and his forces. And you're kind of expecting like, okay, we're gonna watch as this new kingdom, in a sense, develops and takes a firm grasp and clashes with Odium. But that doesn't actually happen. A lot of stuff happens off screen between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. And where we pick up in Rhythm of War is that Urithiru has kind of become its kingdom now. There are tons of Surgebinders for every order. They've been fighting with the Singers and with Odium for a year now. And yeah, it just felt kind of off. There's this really big disconnect. There's also some reveals that are mentioned casually that are things that I think I would have liked to, be in the room when they were discovered. There's a lot of talk about the sleeping spren. I don't remember what it's called, but basically the spren that powered Urithiru. And so there's talk of, can we wake her up? Can we place her? And I just wished I had been there when they've been making some of these discoveries. It feels like we're missing a book's worth of content. Another thing that I don't really like with the time skip is what's been done with Kaladin. Basically what's happening with Kaladin in this book is that he's kind of backtracked into a really depressive state. And it makes sense. It's really sad to watch, but it makes sense. I think even based off the events of Oathbringer, you can kind of start to see where that would come from, with him being unable to swear the fourth ideal. But there's a lot of things that happen off screen. There's a whole relationship that he had that failed, and that all happens off screen. He's struggling with his friends, struggling with his parents, and we don't really get to see any of that. It's told to us, but it kind of feels like it appeared out of left field for a series that we've usually been seeing, every step that these characters have been taking. It feels like a lot happened off screen with Kaladin that I'm not super happy about. Another thought that I just had while reading this, and this is something that I have thought in the past in some of these books, is there isn't as strong of a sense of threat. So in Way of Kings, they're fighting the Parshendi on the Shattered Plains, and you really get the sense that this is a serious battle. Obviously, the battle is kind of a game, so it's kind of interesting, but the Parshendi do feel like a mysterious threat that could become dangerous. In Words of Radiance, Sanderson tries to humanize the Parshendi by showing them through our eyes, showing that they're just another struggling nation trying to defend themselves, and it makes them feel weaker for it. The Parshendi don't really feel like a major threat, and that's kind of when Odium comes in and really strengthens them up. But a feeling that I had in Words of Radiance was that the main villainous force stopped feeling threatening to me, and so I wasn't as worried about the conflict as I had been in Way of Kings. In Oathbringer, then we get some really major reveals about the true power of the Parshendi, who are now the Singers and the Fused, and Odium appears in full force, and Odium is truly terrifying, and the power that he channels through the Fused and through the Singers is really terrifying. And so in Oathbringer, watching both the battle in Kholinar and then the battle in Thaylen City, both felt like, wow, our heroes could get crushed here, like this force could take over the world. But now in Rhythm of War, it kind of feels like we're back to this not as threatening enemy. The Fused squabble a lot with each other. They don't agree. The different surges of Fused are often in conflict with each other, or even have different rules. It's like they're each a mini society in themselves, and they're always fighting with each other, and so they feel kind of not very threatening again. I'm not worried about them. And Venli is really interesting, but watching everything through Venli's eye almost makes the Fused feel like a joke. And so yeah, I'm not worried about them. It's kind of weird, and I don't really love that. The last thing is simply that there's no Dalinar. Dalinar was a huge focus in Oathbringer, really the main focus, and so far he's gone. He's not in part 1. He isn't in part 2 either, or at least like POV chapters for him. But even in like the chapters that he appears in that aren't in his POV, he isn't really doing a whole lot, which is really disappointing for me because Dalinar is my favorite character, and I also feel like he has a lot still to do. I understand that he went through like a major character arc in Oathbringer, so that wrapped up a lot of like the loose ends for his character, but I think there's still a lot more progress that he can make, and so I'm hoping that he shows up later in the book. On to some things that I do like about this so far. I mentioned earlier that I don't really like how Kaladin got to where he is, but now that we're focusing on Kaladin, I do kind of like what Brandon Sanderson is doing. It makes sense and is a real thing that he would backtrack, especially after, being unable to swear the fourth ideal and watching the world grow around him, and like watching his friends move up in the ranks and him not really be needed anymore. I think it makes sense. And in addition to him essentially being told to leave the military and like the Windrunners, you really feel for him and you really understand his struggle, I think. At the same time, it's not always easy to read. But Oathbringer and now Rhythm of War are both really interesting. I'm glad that they're bringing the Ghostbloods back, and she's kind of having to deal with this double life or triple life that she's living. And I can kind of sense where this is gonna go. Just making a prediction here, she's probably going to have to consolidate all of the personalities into one again and like accept Shallan as Shallan, and accept that she has some of the skills of Veil and Radiant, but that she can't use them to protect herself. Oh, also, I did see a spoiler a while ago on Instagram, and it really made me mad because this is huge. So Shallan keeps like referring to this like mysterious thing that she did that was really horrible, but we're like not getting told it. She's like repressing it. But I do know that she killed a Spren before Pattern, I believe. I believe this is the spoiler that I saw. Oh, and the last thing is that I really like the opening sequence, the switching between the battle in Hearthstone with Kaladin and Moash and the Windrunners and Navani's huge ship, and then going back to Shalon on the Shattered Plains in the war camps, rediscovering the involvement of the Ghostbloods, trying to infiltrate the Sons of Honor is all really cool. It leads to a really good introduction to both Kaladin and Shalon, who it seems like are going to be major players in this book, kind of focal characters. But yeah, so those are my thoughts for part 1. I'm really excited, but I think this is my least favorite part, or at least opening, for Stormlight book yet. The time gap especially is really throwing me off, but I will see you guys pretty soon and we'll see how I feel about it at the end of part 2. So I will see ya. Okay, I just finished part 2 last night. My general thoughts are that I like it a lot more than part 1. I think part of it is that I've kind of gotten over the really large time gap that was kind of bothering me. I really like the journeys that happen in this part. We've got Shalon and Adolin exploring Shadesmar, kind of going on a mission, and then that takes up the first half of the part, and it's almost exclusively looking at Shalon and Adolin. We get a few chapters with Kaladin that are honestly not very interesting, but about halfway through, Shalon and Adolin kind of get to where they're trying to go, and it's taken them like a month to get there, and then we cut to Navani and Kaladin, and basically the tower gets taken over, and in the course of like a day, Kaladin and Navani have like their backs up against the wall. We found out a lot about the spren of the tower and kind of what made the tower work, which is really exciting. Yeah, this one just felt a lot more interesting, a lot more streamlined. I love Adolin and Maya. They're really cute. Another character that I really love is Pattern. I don't think I've ever heard a person talk about Pattern before, like in any sort of conversation. But he is really just awesome. I think he's my favorite of the Spren characters, and he's just really likable, really funny. I am worried about the plot that's developing with him maybe being a traitor. That bothers me. I don't think that he's a traitor, but at the same time, I don't know what's going on if he's not. So he's gonna have to explain himself. But yeah, he is amazing. For a while, I was worried that Kaladin, who was a character that they'd really been working on, first part was kind of gonna get shafted in the second part in favor of the expedition in Shadesmar. He gets like 2 chapters, and they're really not very interesting chapters. They're not plot relevant really in the slightest. After we wrap up the Shadesmar plot, we get to the plot focusing more on Kaladin and Navani, and it is really interesting. I was really into the Shadesmar plot, but the other plot with Kaladin and Navani was also really interesting, getting into the sibling and what she has kind of been doing, as well as Kaladin kind of being the last Radiant in the tower and not having his powers, and seeing kind of what that does. His relationship to his family is really interesting in this part, and it ends on this dramatic note of Kaladin having to leave and his father being really angry at him for killing the enemy. His father's kind of a don't kill anyone type of person. So yeah, I'm really excited for part 3. I don't really know even what could happen, but I am ready for it. I'm excited. Yeah. Alright, I just finished part 3 of Rhythm of War. This one picks up immediately after part 2 with the takeover of the tower like fully established, and we kind of go into Kaladin and some of the other characters in the consequences of that. And I have to be honest, this was probably the most boring part of any Stormlight Archive book I've ever read. Not that it was completely boring and that I was like bored out of my mind, but it was probably a good 250 pages or more, and most of the POVs weren't very interesting, and often the chapters felt like they weren't accomplishing very much. The character that we focused the most on here is Kaladin, who I usually really like. I think Kaladin is a really interesting character, but it was just kind of a slog. I understand that Brandon is really trying to get across like Kaladin kind of slipping back into his depressive state that he had in the first book, and the reasoning for that. I understand the reasoning, and like I get it, like this would be horrible for Kaladin to go through at this time, like essentially being isolated, the entire tower resting on his shoulders, and he really can't do anything about it. But it just kind of felt like every chapter with Kaladin wasn't accomplishing anything, or it'd be like the tiniest little things, but it was hardly anything at all. The other like really big character that we look at here is Venli. I feel like Venli is getting more interesting as this book goes along, but even still, her chapters felt, again, kind of like there wasn't a whole lot being accomplished. Her interacting with the Spren, I don't remember what kind of Spren it is, but the one, she's essentially a Radiant because of it. That is really interesting, and there is a really cool scene where she does some stuff with like the stone of the tower, and that's a really cool scene, and it kind of shows that maybe the singers had something also to do with the surges, which was, it was really cool scene, and I like that it's kind of indicating that there are going to be more singers with Radiant Oaths, and that Venli may even have squires, which is really cool. Seeing her battle between trying to fend for herself in a hostile situation and also feel like she has to stand up for the injustice that's being caused in the tower against the humans, especially with Kaladin's family and things like that, was also really cool. And then there are two other POVs that are more interesting but show up significantly less. We've got Navani, who shows up a bit but not nearly as much as the other two. Navani's scenes started kind of boring. It's just, again, like in captivity, can't really do anything. But then it starts getting more into lore-wise. We start finding about like stormlight and other forms of light. And the fused that she's working with is really interesting too, because at least for me, I'm kind of starting to think, okay, the fused have been shown to be more human than we previously thought. They're not just creatures of vengeance and rage. Most of them are absolutely insane. And there's a really touching scene with the fused and her daughter. It kind of almost feels like the fused wants to end this war as much as Navani does, which will be really interesting. I'm excited to see how that goes. And yeah, all the exploration with light and things like that is really cool as well. The last POV character, and this is the one obviously that I was the most excited for, was Dalinar. And again, it kind of feels like at the start of it, it's just war and they're in this combat situation, they're fighting. This is why they're not there at the tower right now. It was kind of a diversion to get them away from the tower, and now they're just kind of chasing a loose end and are distracted. But most of the chapters with Dalinar, there's only a few, are really standouts. There's one with Yasna making a statement as the new queen of Kholinar. Yasna and Wit are a really interesting duo, and the fact at the end of this part, he is about to open up to her about Thedakar, who I know who that is because I read ahead accidentally. But I'm excited how that's gonna play out. I'm really curious about how that works. And then scenes with Dalinar and Taravangian, which was really interesting, especially there was Taravangian kind of seeming to switch sides again. He sees maybe there is a hope to defeat Odium. I think that was a really touching scene, especially in the context of Oathbringer. I really liked the scene with Dalinar and Taravangian. And then the last scene with him and the Stormfather, and him pushing the Stormfather to do more than just the same things he's always done. Killing people with the storm and being a storm of vengeance. Dalinar kind of trying to push the Stormfather to be more and be better, which is really interesting. And I'm curious if that's going to lead to something. I'm really excited for part 4 though. I feel like the end of part 3, as kind of a slog as it was, sets up some really interesting developments that I'm really excited for. I'm also excited to get back into Shallan and Adolin's POVs. They were completely absent in this part, and I have no idea what they're doing in Shadespire right now. Last we saw, Adolin is getting captured by the Honor Spren, and Shallan kind of has to go in and find some Ghostblood people and also probably save her husband. So yeah, I'm excited for what's gonna happen going forward with them. I hope that they show up in this next scene. I hope it doesn't drop everything else and only focus on Adolin and Shallan. I hope that we get a back and forth, because I don't know, I just wasn't into not seeing them at all in this part. I would hate them to drop everyone from this part and only focus on them in the next part. So I'm hoping that it's a balance between the two, but we'll see. I will see you guys after I finish part 4, so. Alright, I've just finished part 4 of The Rhythm of War. It's only been a few days. I've actually had just like a ton of time available, surprisingly. Between my job and school, everything kind of slowed down, and so I was able to actually get in a lot of reading. Kind of breezed through part 4 in a few days, and honestly it was really exciting. This part feels kind of like a return to form for the book. Like I said before, part 3 was kind of a slog, kind of a drag, and it was hard to get through, and it was really long. Part 4 and also part 5 are going to be a lot shorter. We're getting to the last couple hundred pages of the book, and there's only so much left to go. So part 4 wasn't too long, and part 5 is only going to be like 150 less than 200 pages for sure, which is short for a Stormlight book if you've never read a Stormlight book. There were a lot of things that I liked about it. Not everything I think was fixed from my complaints in part 3. We returned to Adolin and Shallan, and their parts were really good. Them being in Shadesmar at the Tower Lasting Integrity, the Honor Spren stronghold, was really cool seeing Spren society, but also kind of the situations they get themselves tied up in. Adolin's trial essentially for the Radiant Bonds to like save the Windrunners and also save himself was really, really cool, and the ending to that was honestly perfect. I just love him and Maya, and I think that was just done very well. It was also just a really cool revelation that, you know, the Spren agreed with the humans. It wasn't a betrayal of Spren with the Recreants, it was an agreement to give up the oaths and step away, which really makes you think. We thought we knew everything that there was to know about the Recreants, why they broke their oaths and stuff, but it's hinted here that there might be more, that the oaths would eventually lead to the destruction of Roshar, which is really cool, and I can't wait to see what comes of that. Shallan, with her personalities and Formless, was also very cool, and her hunting this Herald and trying to capture him, and we know that it would kill him, although she technically doesn't know that. Yeah, it was really cool. It was resolved really interesting. I'm still unclear if Radiant, her Radiant personality is still a part of her. I think it was a good conclusion to Veil. I had the reveal spoiled that she had a Spren before Pattern, so it was revealed well, but it wasn't as much of a shock to me. But yeah, I'm curious if she's back to just one person. I think that would be really, really great, and happy for her. She's doing so good now. Kaladin is really not very much in this chapter. Most of this chapter is Kaladin recovering from the events of the last part, so that was honestly probably really good. I think Kaladin kind of gets his redemption or reinvigoration at the end of part 3 with Hoyd, and then he just needs to sit it out for a little bit. His parts were really starting to drag, and so I'm excited to see what he does at the end, but I'm glad that he kind of sat this one out. Navani is kind of more of the focus of this one. Her and the Fused working to discover anti-void light, and the whole journey to that is really interesting. It's really cool to see the ways that they work through it, and at first I thought it was kind of weird that so much of it has to do with music, but it makes sense when you consider like the singers are the original inhabitants and they have a lot to do with music. It just makes sense. I had to kind of step back for a second and think about it. I think it works a lot better than I was feeling it at first. But yeah, really cool, the journey to do that. It all makes sense. I will say that I think the last scene where Navani actually discovers the anti-void light kind of feels just like a science experiment. Like the way that it's written, it's very blunt. There's not really a lot of excitement around it. She just kind of does it and it happens, and that was kind of a letdown. Although the preceding scene with the Fused like murdering her daughter for release with the anti-void light and like the explosion and the betrayal and everything was very cool and very dramatic, and a cool end to the part. Dalinar's actually absent from this part, which is a letdown, but I'm expecting him to return in part 5, and I'm excited. I assume he's going to be booking it for the tower like crazy. And then I think the last thing to talk about is Venli is a little bit more interesting in this part. She's kind of embracing her role that she has to step into as a Radiant and as singer. There's some really cool stuff, like them revealing that all the listeners that they sent away apparently did survive and are on the edge of the Shattered Plains, and so she wants to kind of get out to them. Really interesting interactions with her and Rlain. I'm curious to see how that pans out. Something that I didn't talk about in my last section on this is the flashback chapters with Venli and Eshonai. Honestly, these are interesting, but not super interesting. I think that they're the weakest of the flashbacks in all the books so far. It's stuff that we mostly already knew. I guess I didn't know the extent to which Venli was puppeteering, and we kind of get some lore explanations for some of the things, some stuff about the listeners and things like that. But there isn't really like anything crazy happening that we didn't already know. So I feel kind of weird about that. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in part 5, but I don't really think that I will. I feel like most of the stuff that going forward is like stuff that we already know. But yeah, I will be back for part 5, maybe in a few days if I keep up this pace, and we'll see how this one works itself out. I'm excited. It is a beautiful day out. We've got the windows open and it's probably getting to be like 60s here, which I'm really excited for. Spring is coming. The other exciting thing that happened is that I read all of part 5 of Rhythm of War, which is probably 150 pages in one day. I just had some extra time and I could not put it down. It really was gripping. I really liked the ending to this book, and I think I like the comparison between it and Oathbringer. Oathbringer ends with this gigantic battle, like the biggest battle ever in any of the books. It's Odium's plan A. Odium intends to win right there at the end of Oathbringer. There's like a chapter that is 50 pages long that's just that battle, and then the battle continues after that chapter. The battle itself is like 150, maybe 100 pages. It's like absurdly long. In contrast, Rhythm of War's ending is a lot quieter. This is Odium's repositioning for Plan B, and maybe realizing that he maybe can't win this war this time around, but he's gonna try to cause as much destruction as possible. And they foil him in this too. So while it isn't like this massive war that takes over the ending of the book, I think it works very well and also sets up for book 5, I think, in a really good way. So at the end of this book, Odium's plan to take over the tower has failed. They've pushed out his forces, and a lot of the singers and even some of the fused have turned away from him. They've backed him into the corner, and this is where Dalinar sets up a contract with him. One that will guarantee the end of the war in 10 days, which is just amazing. It makes me so excited for the 10-day format in Wind and Truth, but I know it's not going to be as simple as in 10 days we fight, because that book is the largest book on my bookshelf. There's going to be stuff that goes down, and I'm so excited. Adolin and Shallan wrap up their stories pretty interesting. There isn't a lot that happens in this part. Their plot kind of ends separate from the rest of the story, which I don't love, but I assume that it's going to feed back into Wind and Truth. And regardless, I think the things that they established were really interesting. The Spren agreeing to the recreants and knowing that they were going to die, I think gives a lot of weight to what is building in this book, and I'm really excited to just see how he follows up. I think basically this book just makes me excited for book 5, while also being a very solid book in and of itself, and one that is 100% worth reading by its own merit. In terms of Navani, people say that this is the Navani book. I don't know if I would say that this is the Navani book in the way that maybe Oathbringer is the Dalinar book, or Way of Kings is the Kaladin book. I feel like Navani shares a lot of the screen with other characters. Kaladin probably even has more page time than Navani does in this book, honestly. While I wouldn't say that this is a Navani book, Navani is a very interesting character in this book. Her bonding with the sibling was very cool, and the implications of that are going to be really awesome. It kind of feels like the perfect conclusion to her character, that she's been working on these, like, ever since book 1, she's been doing, stuff with Fabrials and advancing their science, and now she literally has access and essentially functions as the largest Fabrial on the planet. And it's really exciting. I can't wait to see what role she has to play in book 5 as well. I will say that I think this is the first Stormlight book that I'm not going to give a 5-star rating to. I think I'm going to give it 4 stars, only because that middle portion, like part 3, really dragged. And that is, I think, the most dragging a Stormlight book has ever felt. Kaladin kind of felt like he wasn't going anywhere. Navani didn't really feel like she was doing anything. And those were like the two characters, other than Venli, who I wasn't super attached to yet. I will say I like how Venli's character turned out in the end, and her returning to the old listeners. That middle chunk, probably 250 pages, that was a drag, and I could not wait to be out of it, honestly. Everything else about the book I loved. Parts 1, 2, 4 and 5, amazing. But part 3, man, that took some work. I think that part, it took me about 2 months to read Rhythm of War, and I spent one of those months on part 3. It was hard. But yeah, I am really excited for both the implications of this book on the Stormlight storyline as well as the Cosmere as a whole. I am reading through the Cosmere in order, and so next up will be the Lost Metal. but I think before I start The Lost Battle, I'm gonna read something else, something that isn't Brandon Sanderson. If you saw in my ranking video of the books I read in 2025, I kind of want to branch out. I read pretty much only Brandon Sanderson last year, and while I wouldn't say that I feel burnt out necessarily by him, I see a lot of value in reading books by other people and kind of branching out beyond just that one. I have an idea of what I'm gonna read, and I'll tell you guys about it when I read it. So yeah, I'll see you later.